Askreddit. People who were born deaf but gained hearing later in life, what objects did you expect to make noise? Seems like everyone is answering the reverse. My friend got his hearing at age 6. He swears to this day that he thought flowers would make some sort of noise and that's what attracted bees. Finally a real answer lol edit, how y'all gonna upvote this literal non-comment 16,000 times? Not me, my good friend who's hard of hearing told me about how before he got hearing aids, he thought that all fridges made a beeping sound, like an alarm, when you open them so the house knows when you're getting something. Turns out his mom just told him that to stop him from eating all their snacks. This is awesome lol. Parenting hack FTW. At least until the kids got hearing aids. Obligatory not me, but my godfather, dad's lifelong best friend. He was born with hearing but lost it before age 2 due to some health issues. Went his entire childhood deaf and in his 20s finally got a hearing aid. At the time, he and his wife were living in the downtown of a large city. Apparently he had it about 2 weeks before he threw it out, saying everything was too loud, he hated the noise and sound, that things were more peaceful without it. 15 years later, he moved out into the country on a few hundred acres of woods. Still, he refused to wear a hearing aid, and kept refusing for the next 10 years. Finally, his wife convinced him to give it a try, and his mind was blown. He couldn't believe how quiet everything was and how much he enjoyed hearing. He finally explained that he thought the noise of the traffic downtown was the wind and that it sounded like that everywhere, all the time. So, for 25 plus years, he thought wind sounded like the hundreds of cars driving by. I too wish if I can just turn off my hearing and relax a fracking day without noise. My 3-year-old son is deaf, and we just had a visit this morning from his signing teacher who is also deaf herself. She recently had cochlear implants fitted and while we were talking, signing she said, "I'm sorry, I can't concentrate, I can hear a horrible constant noise, it's not stopped the whole time I've been here." Turned out it was the rain on my conservatory roof. Ironically one of the most pleasant sounds there is. My cousin was born deaf and went through an operation to recover part of his hearing when he was 12. He sometimes uses hearing aids but can get by without them in general. His family had a bunny, tupu. Of course he had learned about cows mooing, cats meowing etc. before he had his surgery. He was very shocked when he came home and greeted his bunny that it made no sound. It took the longest time for him to understand that bunnies are pretty quiet animals in general. He explained he thought all pets were loud. Honestly, I'm hearing and have a hard time with the sounds of rodents and lagomorphs. They're usually not audible to us when they make noise because it's so high-pitched. When I can hear them, it's so high that it just doesn't quite sound real. Exceptions for things like guinea pigs that weak in a pretty noticeable way. My old roommate in NYC got implants at, I think he was 25 or 26, he was shocked that the radiators in the house didn't make noise, he could feel them, and was absolutely sure, given their shaking and vibrating from time to time, that they were going to be quite noisy. On the flip side, he was deeply annoyed by the buzz of fluorescent lighting, which he did not expect to make noise. This and old CRT TVs. I have really good high-range hearing, and the old CRTs straight up hurt my ears. My girlfriend is not deaf, but she is hard of hearing which for her means that she can't hear high-frequency sounds. She recently got hearing aids that amplify the frequencies she can't hear and was shocked to find out that birds and crickets chirped to the point that she thought the birds were trying to attack her and was horrified that we were surrounded by millions of bugs when I explained what the crickets were. My girlfriend is not deaf, but she is hard of hearing which for her means that she can't hear high-frequency sounds. She's all about that bass, no treble. Not me, but when I was in high school a bunch of kids would meet in a nearby no man's land and hang out before school started. I spent most of my mornings loudly talking to my almost deaf friend. One day he showed up and said he had a new hearing aid. I didn't have to yell at him to get him to hear me anymore, yay. Few minutes later he asked what that noise was. I asked which noise, listening and hearing nothing out of the ordinary. I don't know, it's like a weird beeping, almost musical, really bizarre but actually kind of pleasing. Took me a minute to realize my man was hearing bird song for the first time in his life. Was a pretty cool moment. Edit. I now realize this is maybe the opposite of what was being asked. That's a great story. I was born with tons of fluid in my ears and only had very slight hearing at best. When I was 6 months old, I had a surgery that put tubes in my ears to drain the fluid. My mom says when I came home from surgery, I went to my toy box and shook every toy in it to see what sounds they made. Honestly, it wasn't that serious but did lead to some auditory processing issues and I had to see a speech therapist until I was 7. Crazy what a difference 6 months of hearing makes that early on. 2 of my siblings had to get tubes in their ears at a young age. My brother had to see a speech therapist. As kids I had to do a lot of the speaking and translating for him, but now he in his 30s and only speaks with a small impediment. I had a child friend that gained hearing and she didn't realize you could control the volume of your voice. So when I whispered to her she said, "Hang on, I think I need to adjust my hearing aid." At first I just thought, oh, it mustn't be working, until I realized what was going on. She whispered to me for about 2 weeks solid just to practice laughing face, laughing face, laughing face. Yes, she also practiced shouting, but we did that in secluded woodlands. That should be like the beginning of a cute but sad movie. Question: if you lose your hearing, can you still have tinnitus? That would be a nightmare to have ringing in your ear without any other sound to mitigate it. Quick Google search brought up, being hearing impaired doesn't exempt you from these kinds of sounds unfortunately. Deaf people are more likely to have tinnitus, in fact. It's thought to be linked to the damage that caused the deafness itself. Removed. What is the mysterious ticking noise? The kid pondered as a series of wizard-themed puppets crept up behind him. Edit. To everyone asking, it was basically about a deaf kid who got an implant and was annoyed by a random ticking noise, which was the ticking of a clock. Well, after the cochlear implant, I started hearing a lot of things that I never knew existed, but here are a few things I thought would make a noise, but nope. Edit. To clarify this, 1. I expected the light bulbs to hiss or flickering sound when you turn them on. I was so disappointed. 2. I thought you could hear your eyes close, blink, but there is no sound when you close your eyelids. No whoosh. 3. You know how wind makes a noise going through trees? I thought it would make more noises going through hair. Nope. 4. Now I could hear soft sounds, but I still get spooked when I see a bug crawling, and I don't hear it. They don't make a noise, at all. 5. Pooping does not make a sound, only the splash into the toilet. I thought the body makes a noise to push it out. I was disappointed. Someone who answered the question the right way around, haha. Also something semi-related to one of them. I remember someone once saying when they were a kid, lying in bed, they kept hearing this sort of scraping sound but when they sat up it stopped. They were really freaked out thinking it was some monster somewhere. Turned out it was her eyelashes brushing against her pillow every time she blinked. Not personally, but one of my friends basically said, "How the fuck do you people stand all this noise? You learn to filter. I'm half deaf. In crowded and noisy places it's gonna be weird for me if you yell from a distance. No triangulation." Again obligatory. Not me, but my dad progressively went deafer as life went on and was almost 100% deaf by around age 20. He got a cochlear implant when I was around 7 years old, put them in, asked my mom, "Are the kids always this damn loud?" and proceeded to take the cochlear implant off so he didn't have to listen to my little brother and I yelling. Always thought that was funny. Honestly, being deaf when having young children probably makes parenting more tolerable, haha. My dad was born with severe hearing loss but it wasn't detected until he was 50. His parents just thought he was ignorant if he didn't answer them. It's quite sad actually, his parents definitely failed him. He is also dyslexic and it's affected every part of his life and self-worth etc. Anywho. My mum told him he needed a hearing test because the TV was starting to deafen her. He thought, oh, it's just years of loud music and using a shotgun occasionally. So he has this hearing test and some other tests etc. and gets told he was actually born deaf in one ear and significant loss in another. He can't hear phonics. You can imagine his problems through life. He finally gets hearing aids and the first day he sits down to eat a packet of crisps. He absolutely flips out. What the F is that noise? Holy shxt, my head is exploding. We had to explain you can hear the crunching of food etc. and some foods are louder than others etc. It was heartbreaking to see what he's missed out on. Now he only uses his hearing aids after a good nag from my mum. We still have to put up with his noisy eating but he's back to ignorance is bliss lol. I couldn't hear until I was around 4-ish. I remember being surprised trains were relatively quiet for their size. Most trains are loud as hell in my experience. So my dad was born deaf and got a cochlear implant in his late 30s. He has since passed away so I can't ask him this question directly but a related story. When I was a newborn, my dad was holding me and my mom, who is hearing, was in the kitchen. My dad rushed into the kitchen with me and asked what I was saying because my mouth was moving, and my mom had to explain babies couldn't talk until they were much bigger. It's amazing how limited your perception can be if you aren't surrounded by people who can communicate with you. Unfortunately he didn't learn how to sign until he was a young adult as well so his formative years were basically without language. See below. He and his mother created a very basic language to identify objects, some actions but that's all. When he first heard sound, he didn't understand it and it wasn't what he expected. In response to someone clapping and asking if his implant was working after waking from surgery, he said no it wasn't working, it was, and that it felt like movement in his head. Edited for more information. He grew up in communist Eastern Europe where any kind of sign language was outlawed. He and his mother created their own primitive and secret sign language and he knew very little of his native European language. Children with disabilities were sent to live in boarding schools where they were taught trade skills. However, those with disabilities were heavily discriminated against under communism as adults so he fled to another European country as a refugee, alone, without his family who helped him escape, at the age of 18, and lived in a refugee camp before coming to the USA through the help of a charity service. He learned ASL when he moved to the US through a volunteer service. The US provided him with opportunities he never would have had otherwise. A former coworker went to RIT, where they've got a school for the deaf. In the summertime, hearing all the deaf students loudly having sex with the windows open because they didn't realize how loud they were was one of the funniest things about going there. ACCD to him. Edit. Oops, I guess this is the inverse of the question. Still interesting though. Edit. Edit 2. Thanks for the gold. It's my first. Edit 2. That's hilarious. Also, good for them. My daughter suffered from recurring ear infections, that went on for over a year, before I could get the doctors to push for tubes in her ears. I felt that she was either unable to hear or that it was very muffled. The doctor that placed the tubes confirmed my suspicions in stating that she most likely heard noise as though she was underwater. I cannot attest to what exactly she expected to make noise, but I still tear up when I think about her face as she re-explored the entire house with renewed fascination. I can however, give my subjective opinion based on her facial expressions. The thing that sticks out the most is the refrigerator. She was in awe over the humming noise that it makes, a noise that we often tune out because we are so accustomed to it. As she focused on that appliance for a bit, she made her way around to everything else that was large and stood in front of it, as if she was expecting everything to have its own secret noise. I can't say for sure, but the amount of time that she stayed with her face pressed up against the inactive washing machine and dryer, leads me to believe with almost certainty, that she was expecting those to hum and were as well. At her age, you wouldn't expect her to make a correlation between similarly sized appliances, but I'll be damned if it didn't appear that way. I swear I read somewhere that most people expect the sun to make noise but for the life of me, can't seem to remember where. Sad face. Edit. To all the guys questioning my memory, rightfully so. Cheeky smiley face. I saw it on 9gag and yes I honestly didn't remember where. If Teletubbies is to be believed, it makes the sound of a laughing baby. Can you believe most deaf people don't know that erections make sounds? Boy oi 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 oing. Is this because of the sun post? Yeah, definitely. Got waterproof hearing aids. Taking a shower scared the everlasting Christ out of me. Edit. I have a cochlear implant on one side, hearing aid on the other. I don't use waterproof unless I go swimming. One time, after swimming, I decided to keep them on when I was showering, and I got shivers down my spine. I take my hearing aids out before turning the water on and when I'm blow drying my hair, those sounds make my skin crawl. I honestly thought the sun would make sounds. Edit. I thought it would make sizzling sounds. It's a giant ball of fire, it's hard not to think it makes any noise. If space could transmit sound, the sun would be by far the loudest object in the solar system, as observed from the surface of Earth. I was deaf for a long amount of time, but when I got some machine to fix it, IDK what it's called, but I was very annoyed by everything. The thing I least expected to make noise was just walking and water flowing. Do you prefer the sound of hot water or cold water? One of my close friends in high school has a younger sister who used to be deaf before she got cochlear implants. We were watching a silent movie for a film class, and her younger sister thought that all movies made noise, and she ran out thinking she was deaf again. Edit for clarity, we watched it at her home for an assignment, we were pretty quiet. Younger sister just panicked to see a movie playing and no noise because her experience is that movies are real loud. Only realized that she could still hear after she heard the door close. Meanest prank ever. ITT. People who answer the question, people who were born deaf but gained hearing, what makes noise that you thought was quiet? SMH. Title is such a great twist on the concept but everyone ignored it. Edit. Obligatory thanks kind stranger less than 3. IDK what I am gonna do with this exorbitant wealth shocked face. Indeed I'm surprised to read so many top posts that has nothing to do with the question, only 2 so far. I'll keep on scrolling a bit. Outlets. ZZZZZZZZZZ. I can't remember what I expected to make noise but first time I had hearing aids, I found out scratching my skin, brushing my hair and opening the door made noises. I got freaked out by birds as well. Kitchens are really noisy. I remember trying to figure out a bizarre sound to describe it was bubbling water. Oh, and when people smile, it makes a noise. Edit to add smile noise description. When people smile there is a noise I can only describe as a click as the lips brush against the teeth. Took my 6 years to figure out what it was whilst going from straight face to smiling in the mirror with hearing aids in. Open-mouthed smile only. My friends and colleagues love that I can hear them smiling without looking at them now. Edit 2. Thank you kind person for the silver. It's my first. Everyone who read this just started smiling. Candles or fire. I regained my hearing at the age of 2 so I was absolutely heartbroken when I discovered that birthday candles did not make any sounds while burning. Also, I expected flashing lights to make some sort of noise. Not really sure what I expected exactly but maybe like a siren or a loud bang. To be fair, fire does make a crackling sound, but everything else has to be really quiet. Or the fire has to be really big. Oh, for once I actually have a relevant story for one of these. I was born with impaired hearing but had an operation to fix it when I was very young. My dad loves to tell the story of me coming home for the first time with clear hearing. I get home, go to the bathroom to do my thing and flush. Except I had never heard a toilet flush before. I bolt out of there in tears screaming for my parents because I couldn't handle the shock that the toilet makes that much noise. To be fair, a lot of hearing kids are terrified by how loud toilets are. I had a cousin who was born deaf and got their hearing fixed at the age of 9. Don't know how but surgery I think. They didn't realize that everything made noises. Wind, water, breathing, chewing and they were annoyed for a few weeks but got used to it. Cochlear implant most likely. I had a friend who was born deaf but got hearing aids. She always thought people yawning was people randomly screaming so it always confused her why people would be screaming in the library, movies, at church, in public, etc. She never asked why were people screaming because she thought it was normal. After she got the hearing aid she thought she'd be hearing people scream when they yawned. Had she never yawned herself? My son got hearing aids just about 6 months ago. He had a mid-range hearing loss at about 50% total loss. He was shocked at how much noise rain makes. He also was surprised to learn that when he rubs his hand across fabric, leather seats, clothes, etc., that it makes noise. Poor kid, he had to discover background noise at 12 and then go through the process of making it background noise. The biggest change for him was learning that people have different voices. He could generally tell male from female, but he said that basically women all sounded the same and men all sounded the same. I guess pitch was completely absorbed by his hearing loss. Poor kid, he had to discover background noise at 12 and then go through the process of making it background noise. As I understand it, a lot of autistic people have to deal with that too. It's very difficult for a lot of them to filter out sounds that allistic people can easily ignore. I wasn't born deaf but went deaf due to illness probably around the age of 4 months. Got my hearing back around 8 years old through surgery. I used to think traffic lights made noise. Street signs, too. Like when a stop sign has a blinking light for added visibility. I think that's actually where I got the idea in my head. They're trying to get your attention, right? So of course they must put sirens in all the traffic lights. My mom says I used to hold my ears when we'd drive through an intersection, though I don't remember that part. These days many of them just yell at you. Asterisk do not cross asterisk asterisk do not cross asterisk asterisk you may now cross asterisk. ITT, nobody understands the question. I gotta ask, what the frack does ITT stand for? It's the main Reddit shorthand that I can't figure out. ITT, people not understanding or answering the question. Because they couldn't read it loud enough? I want to hear about farting. There's this funny anecdote of a school teacher that had to explain to her deaf students that they could hear them fart. Here's a link. I read once that when people born without hearing hear for the first time they are often shocked that the sun doesn't emit sound. I suppose it does look kind of noisy, The sun emits a shit ton of sound, fortunately space is a vacuum. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe.